Imagine waking up to find out the guy hired to keep your landlord in check just fired the entire board, locked the doors, and declared himself king of the hill. We're talking about Bill Pye, the head of the federal housing regulator who basically just pulled a GTA-style carjacking on the entire U.S. mortgage market. This man didn't just step over the line, he erased it. He installed himself as the chair of the boards of the very companies he's supposed to be watching, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. We are talking about a $7.7 trillion empire, literally half of all home mortgages in America, now sitting in the pocket of one guy who decided the law was more of a suggestion. He didn't stop there, though. He purged 14 major board members and replaced them with his own loyalists, including a former partner from his private equity firm and even a high-level cost cutter from Elon Musk's inner circle at SpaceX.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, the President announced on January 9th, in his words, quote, effective January 20th, 2026, I, as President of the United States, am calling for a one-year cap on credit card interest rates of 10%. In remarks at the World Economic Forum in Davos, the President further said, quote, the profit margin for credit card companies now exceeds 50%. He also indicated that Americans are paying 28, 30% interest rates. You were one of his top economic advisors, Mr. Secretary. Do you support interest rate caps to improve affordability on credit?
I wholeheartedly support President Trump's policy, and I think that what you've just said would be in direct contrast to what Senator Warren said about this administration favoring the big banks, but those are facts.
Well, I don't think my statement indicates at all what Senator Warren said or meant. I wanted an answer, you gave me one. Yep. But let's look at the current situation. We already have legislation that protects service members by putting a 36% cap, not just on credit cards, but all credit relationships, and it protects them from being exploited. And as in my youth, I was a company commander and saw it firsthand. Would it make sense as a first step to provide a 36% interest rate for all Americans, not just service members?
36% doesn't seem like much protection to me, Senator.
Well, it's better than some of the things that are being presented to service members without the rates. These new plans to buy commodities, and sometimes the rates go to 500, and still today, you have entrepreneurs who are charging extraordinary rates, and particularly to vulnerable populations, which I know they don't congregate at Harvard Square, but they also don't hang out in New Haven either. So I think that would be a sound step, Mr. Secretary.
Senator, you haven't seen all of New Haven.
I haven't, but I've seen a lot of it, the parts that you might have missed. The situation at Fannie and Freddie is significant. We have significant federal interest financially in Fannie and Freddie. But under the director, Mr. Pulte, these taxpayer-owned assets are no longer in compliance with the law or with stock exchange listing standards. Pulte has appointed himself as director of both boards, even though the law says, quote, the director may not hold any office position or employment in Fannie or Freddie. A majority of the Fannie board has not been determined to be independent. The audit committee is no longer comprised entirely of independent members. And the the governance has been sacked by political affiliates. These all are prohibited by law and regulation. So how will you bring them into compliance, Mr. Secretary?
That would be FHFA, not Treasury.
Excuse me. You are one of the largest, or the taxpayers are. You provided them, Treasury did, not you personally, a $200 million bailout in 2008, and you have no interest in Fannie and Freddie?
I'm very interested in Fannie and Freddie, and I'm interested in fulfilling the mission to the American people to keep mortgage rates low.
What about following the laws?
So again, you should ask Director Pulte. I do not see I don't think this creates a.
Well, all right, you have nothing to do with Fannie and Freddie. Director Pulte has said that you and him are, quote, very aligned, and we meet regularly about the conservatorship. By the way, it's in conservatorship because of Secretary Paulson, your predecessor. According to Fannie and Freddie's annual reports, the companies, quote, continue to rely on financial support from Treasury pursuant to our senior preferred stock purchase agreement, under which taxpayers own 1 million preferred shares on a warrant to purchase up to 80% of their shares. Treasury staff manages those shares and warrants for the taxpayers. Your predecessor, Hank Paulson, placed these companies into conservatorship. So you have the premise or the power to place Fannie and Freddie into conservatorship. I would think that that gives you a little bit of leverage talking to Mr. Pulte about why he's not following the law. You're reneging on responsibilities, Mr. Secretary. And you're also, being the senior person here, your behavior to some of my colleagues is absolutely childish. Thank you.
This isn't just a management change. It's a full-blown boardroom coup designed to silence anyone who actually knows how to read a compliance manual. The main character syndrome here is off the charts. Every single claim I'm making is backed by statutory text that says this move is 100% illegal. According to 12 U.S.C. Section 4512, the director cannot hold any office or position in any companies he regulates, period. It's a black and white rule meant to keep the foxes out of the henhouse. But Pai, he's acting like an industry plant for the elite, dismantling the safeguards that were put in place after the 2008 crash to make sure we all didn't lose our shirts again. This is the ultimate PR masterclass in gaslighting the public. They want you to believe this is just efficiency and slashing bureaucracy, but when you look at the receipts, it looks a lot more like a hostile takeover of taxpayer-funded assets. We're talking about companies that only exist today because we, the taxpayers, bailed them out to the tune of $187.5 billion. And now the guy in charge is treating them like his personal playground, while the rest of us are struggling to pay rent. The adrenaline hit comes when you realize the timing. While you were scrolling or trying to figure out why your grocery bill is doubling, these guys were in a smoke-filled room, metaphorically or maybe literally, deciding that independent oversight was too boring for their new vision. They put dozens of staff members on leave, the people whose actual job is to make sure your mortgage doesn't turn into a toxic asset. This fall-off needs to be studied because it's a masterclass in how to dismantle a democracy from the inside out using legal jargon and boring-sounding committee hearings. If you've ever wondered why housing feels like an impossible dream, look no further. This is the blueprint for how the elites ensure you stay a permanent renter while they gamble with the foundation of the economy. But here's the open loop that should keep you up at night. Why now? Why would Pai risk a federal investigation and a GAO probe just to sit in these specific chairs? There is something much bigger than efficiency happening behind these closed doors. We're talking about a move so bold that even the most cynical DC insiders are looking at each other saying, wait, can he actually do that? The receipts are receding, and they point toward a future where the rules only apply to you, not the people running the $7.7 trillion machine. This is the dark reality that the mainstream media is too scared to touch because it involves their biggest donors and their most powerful allies. We're just getting started. Now, let's get into the room where it happened. Picture the Senate Banking Committee on February 5th. The air is thick with that high-stakes D.C. tension because Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is in the hot seat. This is the guy who manages the nation's checkbook, and Senator Jack Reed is coming at him with receipts that are absolutely glowing. Reed lays it out. Taxpayers are on the hook for billions. The law is being ignored by the housing regulator, and the entire governance of Fannie and Freddie has been sacked. And what does the most powerful financial officer in the country do? He hits the ultimate eject button. He looks Reed in the eye and essentially says, "Not my department. Go talk to the guy who's actually breaking the rules." It's a masterclass in dodging accountability while wearing a suit that costs more than your monthly mortgage payment. This is the getaway driver move. Bessent wants you to believe that the Treasury is just a passive observer in this $7.7 trillion drama. But here's the insider truth they don't want you to Google. The Treasury Department isn't just some random bystander. Back in 2008, when the housing market was a smoldering crater, it was the Treasury that cut the check for $187.5 billion to keep these companies alive. In exchange, they didn't just get a thank you note, they got warrants to buy 80% of the stock. That means the American taxpayer, represented by Bessent, is effectively the majority owner. Imagine if the majority owner of a company watched the CEO fire the board and hire his buddies, and then told the shareholders, "Hey, don't look at me, I just work here." It's a level of gaslighting that would make a toxic ex blush. Senator Reid wasn't having it. He called Bessent's behavior absolutely childish, and for good reason. When you have that much financial exposure, you don't get to shrug your shoulders. The Treasury has senior preferred stock purchase agreements that give them massive leverage. They could stop this boardroom coup with a single phone call, but instead, Bessent is giving Bill Pai total cover. Why? Because if the Treasury admits they're in charge, they have to answer for the fall-off in housing affordability. By pointing the finger back at the FHFA, they create a loop of zero accountability. Pai says he's aligned with Bessent, and Bessent says Pai is the one in charge. It's a classic shell game played with $7.7 trillion of your money. The real dark reality here is that this isn't just a bureaucratic spat, it's a strategic retreat from oversight. When the person supposed to be the adult in the room decides to play hide and seek with the law, the entire system loses its teeth. Bessent's refusal to acknowledge Treasury's power over Fannie and Freddie is a signal to every corporate raider in the country that the gates are open. They're betting that you'll see a Senate hearing on C-SPAN and immediately touch grass because it sounds too complicated. But we see through the smoke. The getaway driver is idling the engine and the heist is moving into phase 2. Time to pull out the forensic kit because Chapter 3 is where we look at the literal smoking gun. If this were a courtroom drama, this is the moment the lawyer slams the folder on the desk and the music stops. We are looking at 12 U.S.C. Section 4512, specifically subsection G. This isn't some vague policy guideline. This is federal statute. It's written in plain, boring English so that even a career politician can't misinterpret it. The law explicitly states that the director of the FHFA cannot hold any office or position in any entity they regulate, period. It's a black and white rule meant to keep the foxes out of the henhouse. But Pai, he's acting like an industry plant for the elite, dismantling the safeguards that were put in place after the 2008 crash to make sure we all didn't lose our shirts again. This is the ultimate PR masterclass in gaslighting the public. They want you to believe this is just efficiency and slashing bureaucracy, but when you look at the receipts, it looks a lot more like a hostile takeover of taxpayer-funded assets. We're talking about companies that only exist today because we, the taxpayers, bailed them out to the tune of $187.5 billion. And now the guy in charge is treating them like his personal playground, while the rest of us are struggling to pay rent. And let's talk about the SpaceX connection. Bringing in Christopher Stanley, a guy tied to Elon Musk's government cost-cutting machine, was a massive flex. It was a signal that they intended to run these $7.7 trillion giants like a Silicon Valley startup. The problem, when you break things in the mortgage market, people lose their homes. Stanley resigned just 24 hours later after the heat got too high, which is the ultimate coping and seething move. It proved they knew the optics were radioactive. They tried to sneak a Musk Light operative into the heart of the U.S. housing system and got caught with their hands in the cookie jar. The dark reality of Chapter 3 here is that if the law doesn't apply to Pai, it doesn't apply to anyone at that level. We're watching the birth of a PR masterclass in legal immunity. They're betting that the average American won't look up a subsection G of a housing statute. They want you to think this is just nerdy red tape, but this red tape is the only thing stopping a single person from gambling with your home value. When the regulator becomes the regulated, the system isn't just broken, it's been hijacked. The statute says he may not. He did anyway. And the Treasury is just watching the clock. Buckle up, because this is where the efficiency mask slips and reveals the actual nightmare. While Bill Pye was busy clearing out the boardrooms, a new idea started leaking out of the inner circle that sounds like a win for affordability, but is actually a financial death sentence: the 50-year mortgage. Trump publicly floated this in late 2025, and with Pye now acting as his own supervisor at the FHFA, there's nobody left to say this is a scam. On paper, it looks like a PR masterclass: lower monthly payments, easier to get in the door. But in reality, it's the ultimate debt trap designed to turn you into a permanent debt slave for the rest of your natural life. Here is the dark reality that economists are panicking about. Because of the way compound interest works, stretching a loan to 50 years doesn't just lower your payment, it explodes the total cost of the house. We're talking about paying nearly double the interest